one of the greatest tennis players who ever lived, retired, came back just 2 years later and got absolutely destroyed by players with half his talent. So what happened? My guest today, Bill Gurley, has the answer, and it applies to everyone facing down AI. Bill is one of the greatest venture capital investors of all time, an early backer of Uber, Zillow, and OpenTable. He spent his career studying the exact pattern of who wins and who gets wiped out when a technology wave hits. He believed that Bjorn Borg, the tennis player whose career died fast, got left behind for the exact reason AI is going to destroy so many careers. Bill and I discussed the most dangerous response to AI, how to navigate the AI transformation well, and why some people want AI while others fear it. Without further ado, I bring you Bill Gurley. Between AI and massive political upheaval, this is a moment of profound transition for basically everybody. As an investor, how do you think about identifying what the future is most likely to hold, given there's no certainties, and how should people position themselves for that well economically?
When I'm talking about investment advice, I'm always very careful to separate kind of an individual from an institution, right? I just think they're two very different things. For an individual, I think you have to, I always say, if you haven't read A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Burton McHale, then I really don't want to give you advice, because you need some kind of frame rock or bedrock before you dive in. And that book, I think, is the best way to get there. At this point, so much of AI is already reflected in the stock prices. So I don't think there's an insight you're going to have about AI that you're going to be able to, that hasn't already been accounted for, unless you think it's going to be less disruptive, then you might be able to go in and value buy some of the stuff that's been hit more recently on concerns of disruption. The piece of advice I would have for everyone about AI in general is the best way to protect yourself against AI is to be the most AI-enabled version of yourself you could possibly be. Mm-hmm. So everyone, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're focused on, you really need to understand what it's capable of in your field, kind of on the edge. And curious people do that. Like, the curious people have already done that. They don't need to be told to do that. I think the most dangerous thing you could possibly have about AI is to be skeptical about it, and therefore to not be learning about it. And there are a lot of people in that place, especially a lot of older people. I found a lot of academics are in that place. It's a really dangerous place to be, because this thing is different. It's like really important and different.
Now, I have an algorithm that runs in my head that says people just, as a species, fear change, won't embrace it, that
Sure.
Every technological change mows over a generation or two. Do you have like a framework that people can use to
But not everybody.
Get stuck?
My 89-year-old father, has Bluetooth, hearing aids and watches TikTok videos on woodworking.
I like them already.
It's possible, to not be afraid. But I agree with you. A lot of people do, especially when it threatens careers. That's where people get particularly protective and take on a bit of a victimization kind of mindset, and it's dangerous. It puts you further behind. There's a great anecdote. I think it was Bjorn Borg. He retired real early from an age perspective. I think he was around 30, and he tried to make a comeback when he was 36 or something. I'll probably get the specific ages wrong, but in that window where he was retired, the entire industry switched to these big-headed graphite rackets. And he came back and he tried to do his comeback with the wooden racket. He had to get them made from a manufacturer because no one sold them anymore. He got obliterated. And we evolve with our tools. Humans evolve with their tools. And if the industry moved to a bigger, better racket, you just don't have a choice not to. But I love that anecdote because it's easy to laugh at Bjorn Borg with his wooden racket, but you got to see that in yourself if you're a denier of these AI tools.
So when I look at the history of this, it's pretty brutal. So you've got the Industrial Revolution, call it 1 to 2 generations, the Great Electrification, same thing, the internetification. I think the data indicates, and I'm certainly open to a debate, but the data indicates that some of the deaths of despair that we see are from people that were north of, say, 35-ish, that just were never able to matter again from a career perspective. And especially for men, that's just it damages them psychologically so profoundly that they just spiral out and pull out of the job market essentially entirely. So when I think about your dad, I worry, and I'm hoping that you have some countervailing insights here. I worry that he's just wired that way.
Yeah.
Is there an insight you can give to somebody that's afraid right now that will reverse their viewpoint?
I think it's hard to suggest that any idea is a solution for the world's problems. Like, do this and you'll solve world hunger. Do this and you'll solve, there are technological shifts that happen. We, as a country, went from 98% agriculture to less than 2% of the population over a very long time frame, but it happened and it survived and everyone was okay. So, I mean, to a certain extent, and you said this, it's always been happening. So the one thing I know, I'll tell you something that I think is super effective, but one thing I know that's not helpful is rumination. Like sitting around just talking about it and complaining about it doesn't solve anything. And another thing I will tell you, I'm highly skeptical of would be some kind of government retraining program. Like I don't have any confidence in a government program that's going to solve AI job displacement. I mean, I'm open-minded, and if maybe you could point to a policy that worked in another country that we're going to adopt, like they're a best practice, I'm open to it. We should do it. But I'm somewhat skeptical. I do see kind of this resurgence in open-mindedness around trade schools. I think that's kind of cool. There's a lot of anecdotes people will hear about friends that are electricians or plumbers or welders making over $200,000 a year. And they're like, holy shit. So that's kind of cool just to have awareness of that so that people can know that those things are out there. But the thing I wanted to land with in my book, which I'm promoting over my shoulder here, Running Down a Dream, people that have high curiosity and high fascination and probably high agency immediately see AI as a jet fuel, as a rocket booster. It's like, holy shit, look at all the stuff I can now do by myself that I couldn't do before. And they're the ones that come to you and you go, man, you won't believe what I did this weekend when I set up this clawbot. I went off and solved all these problems. I met a guy who does storage buildings he lives in down by Brownsville, and I met him fishing. He's like, you won't believe I needed like 3 more sites in the city. And it just immediately made recommendations, explain why. Like I saved so much time and money, and he's like ecstatically happy, right? About what AI could do for him. If you're high agency and you're curious about your field, it immediately starts solving problems for you. But you got to be in that place. And so the very first chapter of my book is called Chase Your Curiosity. It's all about, and we studied over 100 people that have kind of started on rung 0 of a ladder and gone on to wild success with no economic advantage, no networking advantage, and almost to a T, they were all continuous learners in their life. And I don't think that you're able to be a continuous learner unless you're fascinated with something. And so, one of my big themes is I want to encourage more people to believe they can have a career in a lot of fields that your parents probably would tell you not to chase. Because if it happens to overlap with your fascination, it becomes this perpetual motion machine. Things start falling into place.
The only way I can think to get people on fire for that is the phrase that I use all the time, and it's not nearly as effective as I would like, is skills have utility. And so I agree with you almost violently. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is if you get good at something, you can do something other people can't do. If you can outcompete them, then you can have things they can't have. And you just trigger that like competitiveness, that drive. You've raised 3 kids. Have you found a better way to get people on that path to fascination?
By the way, there's one other thing that I want to throw on top of what you said. People notice fascination. If you're fascinated with something, you come to the table with a lot of positive energy. When you learn new things, your face lights up. You love to talk about the field, and people notice that. So if you're in an interview, if you're trying to close a mentor, if you're looking for peers, like, it all gets easier. And people root for it. They're like, oh, you're into that? You should talk to this guy over here because that's all he talks about. Like, so you get free connections. Like opportunity comes at you when people notice that you're that person. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So you get a lot of stuff for free. I think that our society has, unfortunately, we've entered this kind of industrialization phase of the college journey, and it's gotten way too competitive. The schools have not increased admission numbers, and so you end up with a situation where more and more it's the schools. I think both you and I went to a state school. Those used to be, 30 years ago, like they were the default, like they were the safety place. Oh, I'll just go to state school. Today, those schools have 1,400 SATs and are hard to get into. And because of that, there's this kind of mania that comes over parents, and kids become a part of it. Starting in sixth grade, Jonathan Haidt calls it the resume arms race. We just start, preparing for that college application around sixth grade, and you're taking Mandarin lessons and lacrosse lessons and Taekwondo and you're volunteering, and like the kids are so overscheduled, and it's just it's a pressure cooker.
We'll get right back to the show in a second, but first, let's talk about who's profiting from your personal information. Someone is making money from your data every single day. You just don't see the transaction. Data brokers collect your personal information and sell it for profit. Your address, your phone number, your email, your social security number. Yikes. It's bought and sold constantly without your knowledge or consent. Scammers buy it for identity theft, spammers buy it for targeted harassment, criminals buy it to find you. And the crazy part is, it's completely legal. The solution is Incogni. Incogni tracks down your data across hundreds of data broker sites and removes it automatically. You authorize them once, they handle everything else. They remove your data and keep it removed with repeated requests. Plus, with custom removals, you send them any link where your data appears and their team will remove it. They can't harm you if they can't find you. Go to incogni.com/impact and use code IMPACT for 60% off an annual plan. Try it risk-free for 30 days. All right, now let's get back to the show. Is that bad because they just end up burning out and getting tired? Or is there some sort of creative play that kids need to do that they're not doing?
Well, so, part of my journey in writing a book was just to go read all the greats that have written about this stuff. And both those things you talk about, the top academicians are talking about. So Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit, has said recently if she could write it again, she'd put passion way above perseverance, because she says perseverance without passion is suffering. She says it's just a grind. And we've taught kids how to grind. I think they come out of college exhausted, by the way, because learning about something you're not fascinated with sucks energy. Learning about something you're fascinated gives you energy. Right. And so they're completely different. And so, yeah, that's true. And then other people from Rick Rubin to Ken Robinson have talked about this lack of, and there's a chapter in Calling of the American Mind by Haidt called The Decline of Play. So there's this notion that by not having more free time to just be curious, and that you might not discover what you're actually fascinated with, because you're in you're on this conveyor belt to get to this college. When I was young, when you went to college, they would not allow you to pick a major until the end of your sophomore year. And I don't think it takes a genius to know why that was. They wanted you to take all these core classes, to look around, take a few electives and see what you were interested in before you commit. Today, at many schools, you have to apply to the major. So you're talking to a 17-year-old saying, what do you want to do the rest of your life? And they don't know. They just don't know. And it's okay that they don't know. But there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure. There's pressure on parents too. And so I do think one of the key ideas I had in writing the book, I probably read through 100 biographies. I only wanted to include success stories, and there's about 10 deep success stories in the book from fields that were fields your parents wouldn't recommend. I just didn't want there to be a chapter on a consultant or a banker or a doctor. Like, these are the fields they push people towards. I wanted to give more permission to do these things that are fields you might not think are possible. That's where a lot of fascination lies. Many of the people in the book switched from whatever career path they're on to their hobby. It's a common theme. But the hobby is the thing you're fascinated with.
Yeah, no, I've certainly in my own life gotten a ton of energy out of the things that I'm just naturally pursuing anyway. But let me run a counterfactual. You spent a lot of time in China, which I think is, especially now, I'm a big believer in Thucydides' trap. I think the US and China are locked in this competition that could get very problematic. Regardless of that, I think it's incredibly wise to look at what China does well, to learn from their leaders, to pay attention to all the things that they're doing extraordinarily well. And they've got a cultural value around this concept of 996. So grinding, busting ass, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. They're building extraordinary companies. So what is it that they're doing? Because they're hyper competitive at like the provincial level, and in a way that we're not. So how are they able to leverage that pressure cooker to these like really awesome results? And then we're sort of like crumbling in some way under that pressure.
Yeah. By the way, I've spent a ton of time in China, and I'm pretty fascinated by it. So maybe I could go do a career just thinking about these things. I'll tell you two things about China. One thing that I don't think people realize, of all the places I've visited around the world, the one place where I find the most cultural affinity between entrepreneurs, between American entrepreneurs and some foreign entrepreneurs, China, like the most like-mindedness. And I judge that not by some type of analytical study. I judge it actually by going out to dinner, having a few drinks, and laughing and sharing stories, and how natural it comes. And it's amazing. Co2 used to run a conference called East Meets West, where they'd bring all the entrepreneurs in one place from both cultures, and there'd be late night poker game. I mean, it was just a blast. And I don't know why that's true. I don't know why there's this like very cultural similarity between the two, but and as a result, they love entrepreneurism. They're really great at it. The other thing I would say, and I don't know if this will be true going forward, but I think it was true in the past. Part of what Deng Xiaoping was able to unlock by bringing free enterprise to China was a massive impact in standard of living for the people. So marginal work effort meant, moving from 8 people living in a one-room building working in a rice field to, a 2-bedroom apartment in the city with a completely different life. And, I've often thought about marginal work effort relative to marginal increase in standard of living as something that causes a harder work environment. And if a marginal effort in the US might allow you to get Showtime and Netflix, not just Showtime or whatever, not just Netflix. It takes a lot more work in the U.S. to systemically impact your quality of living. That could slow down in China. There's a point at which you're moving from, a farm to the city where you get this huge leap. And they may have already gone through that. They're very curious. I mean, they're very smart. They're very entrepreneurial. I think there's a misperception that it's all just work ethic. But to your point, Mike Moritz, I think famously about 10 years ago I may have been in the FT or something. He just wrote a piece that said they just work harder than we do, like flat out. And there's an interesting notion in that in many fields, even Americans admit that work ethic is valuable, especially when you look at the arts. For some reason, like it's perfectly okay for the figure skater to toil, right? To work hard. Kobe Bryant works really hard, and we're so fascinated. A cellist in the symphony, if they told you, oh, they studied 100 hours a week, you'd be, wow, that's amazing. But when it comes to work, we adopt this workaholic, and you can't make people do that. So I find that fascinating.
Now, do you have a guess as to why that is?
If you went back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, when we were emerging as a country and really dominating the world in terms of industrial and exporting, I think a lot of people would have viewed almost any occupation just like the figure skater. But I think we've kind of moved past that in a way, and there's just more talk of victimization and remember what is it JFK said? That's not what you can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That sounds very foreign right now, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So my take on this is everybody's stuck in a frame of reference. We can't interface with the world the way that it really is. So we begin to tell ourselves a story about that. When the culture tells you a story that the harder you work, the better your life is going to be, and that gets reflected back to you in real results, like what you were saying in China. And most people just are so ignorant to Chinese history, they don't realize in the 60s, you had people starving to death in China, in the tens of millions.
Right.
And so this is for them, this is a very recent memory. So to watch 400 to 500 million people get pulled out of poverty because you inject this notion of the free market, the harder you work, the smarter you are, the better you perform, that idea of skills have utility. That's going to be the realest thing in the world. And you remember what it was like when it was hard. We've now raised 3 or 4 generations that just think success is the way that it is, and that the government just needs to tax more and everything's going to be great. And I remember this all too intimately because it wasn't but 5 or 6 years ago that I believed inflation was just a natural law. I didn't realize that it was man-made. And so there's so much confusion that people have when your country's just been successful for so long.
Yeah,
you end up in a career that you don't love. The marginal benefit to working hard isn't there. You're in a K-shaped economy, so your boss is getting rich because he owns the company, but you're not. And so you're like, all right, well, this guy's an asshole. He just wants me to work hard, but why? And so the thing that scares me to death about this moment is the reason I became successful was I was middle class to lower middle class. So I didn't grow up with money. I certainly wasn't poor, but I believed that I could do anything I set my mind to. But my parents made it very clear I was going to have to work my ass off. And so I just put my head down for effectively 15, 20 years and just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And then it finally paid off.
Yeah.
But we now make fun of people who do that, because we become culturally so divorced from that path.
Yeah, and the data on the success rate of first generation immigrants that come here specifically because they believe it is the land of opportunity, which they have the mindset that most people in the U.S. had 30, 40 years ago. They succeed a lot more in the U.S. than people that have been here multi-generationally.
Yeah,
but part of being able to affect change in your life and in your career, it comes down to a belief that you can. If you're convinced you can't, you won't. That's for sure. That's a certainty.
So true. Bill, one thing that I find really fascinating, to stick on that theme, about you is I can feel you're somebody who's trying to help people. So you legendary investor, help founders. You write a book, which we'll talk more about the whys in a minute, but you write a book that's effectively self-help. But now you've also started a policy institute. I know some of the punchline of the Policy Institute, but if you would, why are you starting a Policy Institute? What's the end goal? What are you trying to address?
I probably would mention a great book by Arthur Brooks called Strength to Strength. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
had him on the show. He's amazing.
Yeah, the book was written for people who are kind of finished their first career and have a lot on their mind and have a lot of questions about what to do with the rest of their life. That's really, which is a spot I found myself in. I had a incredible career in venture capital. I loved every minute of it. But for a variety of reasons, I raised my hand and said, it's time to move off the field and let the next generation play the game, which I did about 4 years ago. And I went on a listening tour of what to do next. And a lot of people wanted me to do what I think is the more natural thing: run your family office, do a bunch of angel investing. And as I spent time imagining myself in those roles and talking to people about it, I became convinced that that was 100% not what I wanted to do. I've developed a pretty good rhythm about being able to synthesize and communicate. So I did that in my venture career through blogs and eventually things like podcasts. I tested doing it outside my field with a talk I gave at the All In conference on regulatory capture, which had like 4.5 million views. So
extraordinary talk, by the way.
If I can do a talk about regulatory capture and make it that popular, maybe there's a skill there that I should develop. And I'm also really enamored with the notion of effective policy. So I have a quote at the top of the page on my Policy Institute from Milton Friedman that says, one of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results.
Oh man, preach.
And I think we elect a lot of people because we like what they're saying, but no one follows up to see if they can actually create change. And so one of my sole goals will be to think about policies that are effective. I'm enamored by the provincial competition in China, and I wonder if shining a brighter light on state versus state competition could lead to some pretty amazing and positive things for our own country. This is an example of something I'm excited about. The other thing I kind of hold out as a success, there was a very negative opinion on nuclear energy about 6 years ago, not that long ago. And a few people, Steve Pinker, the Collison brothers, Elon Musk, there were a few people who stuck their neck out and said, you guys are all wrong. Josh Wolf at Lux Capital, they said, this is fascinating technology. We should be embracing it. And within a very short time frame, the global perspective on this shifted. And to me, that's pretty amazing that you can use the power of communication and conversation to flip a bit like that. And it's a big, big flip, huge flip. So I'm going to look to see if I can find more things like that where just highlighting things and communicating could potentially change things. The other thing is you get to go meet with and hang out with the top academicians in the world, which gives me a ton of emotional energy, like just chasing that curiosity. And these people are quite fascinating. And so that's another element of it. I've already been to the University of Chicago, which is the birthplace of the notion of regulatory capture, where Professor Stigler won the Nobel Prize. And so they have a Stigler Center, and I went and talked to them about different ideas. And I'm talking to some people about maybe making a regulatory capture index for countries as a way to identify policy that can push against it.
That's awesome. If you don't mind, for people that don't know exactly what it is, can you define regulatory capture?
Yeah. I mean, if you look up George Stigler, he's the one that won the Nobel Prize in 1958. But the simple concept is most regulation ends up being written by the people that are being regulated, at least in the U.S. and the way our government works. And so rather than, I have a phrase I use, regulation is the friend of the incumbent. So they use it to actually raise prices, prevent competition, and further ensconce themselves in the leadership role they're already in. And I believe in some of the more regulated industries in the U.S., particularly finance and healthcare, this is a huge problem, fully locked in. There's more potential disruption in finance around crypto and stable coins, I think, than in the healthcare. I mean, Mark Cuban's doing his thing, which I'm, fully supportive of, but it's hard. It is so ensconced, so locked in.
We'll get back to the show in just a second, but first, let's talk about AI slop. Most AI video tools produce content that's painfully obvious it was made by AI. The pacing is off, the visuals don't quite match your brand, the message gets lost. You end up with something that feels generic, awkward, and forgettable. The exact opposite of what your brand needs. That's why I am very excited about Agent Opus by Opus Clip. Agent Opus turns your audio or scripts into short promo videos that actually look and feel like your brand. You control the script, you upload your product images, logos, or characters, and it produces coherent, publish-ready videos, not random AI content, but videos with consistent messaging, matching visuals, captions, and even background music that fits your precise style. Whether you're promoting a product, building a personal brand, or scaling content across platforms, Agent Opus keeps everything on brand from start to finish. We're really excited about this tool, and you're going to be seeing it in future videos. Check it out at Agent Opus at agent.opus.pro/explore. And now let's get back to the show. One story that you have from your own experience that I think would really help people get this is Tropos.
Yeah.
Walk us through that, because this one made me want to chew glass.
Yeah. So a long time ago, like maybe 20 years ago, I invested in a company that used mesh radio technology to allow, and open spectrum to allow, basically using Wi-Fi outside and like covering entire downtown areas of a city. And we found many mayors all over the country that were excited about this and wanted to, as a public good, offer free data connectivity in their downtown areas, if you will. And I often tried to equate it to, if a city early on built a port, that would make sense because industry moved in and out by boat. And then if they built a train station, that makes sense. Oh, no one said, a city shouldn't be in the train business, right? Because that's how, who else is going to build it? And then the highways, and cities are in the highway business, right? So when industry moved online, it would make sense that a city might want to differentiate itself by having more connectivity and more options for that. But what we ran into is, there are many. I mean, first of all, the telecom space is probably equal to healthcare and finance in terms of regulatory capture. Maybe it leads it. But many of these, whether it's AT&T and Verizon or Comcast, they have lobbyists out the yin yang. Like they have so many lobbyists, and at a state level, and they were able to pass laws that said cities can't compete with them, even though they're getting their poll rights from the cities themselves. And
how do they justify that? Like, do they even try, or is this just money?
But you'd be surprised. They get a lot of free enterprise Republicans agreeing with them because of the notion that they use the mindset that the government's bad at industry. The government shouldn't be in industry, right? But I think that's ridiculous. Like, I think this goes back to maybe city versus city or state versus state competition. If a city wants to offer free connectivity for all of its citizens, I certainly think they should be able to if the citizens are behind it and they have the money, why not, right? But I do think that's the thing they were able to leverage to pass these laws is conservative people believing that they were keeping the government out of things they shouldn't be in. That was the mindset they used to pay. Anyway, they passed these laws everywhere, all over the country. Mm-hmm. The thing that really killed us was the mayor of Philadelphia became excited about doing this, and it put it on the front page of the paper. And the government in the city of Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania was just full of ex-Comcast people. Like they were just like, they were everywhere, and they just crushed us. I think I said in the talk, we were like a sixth grader playing against Michael Jordan, trying to compete in the back rooms of policy.
Do you have a sense of what goes on in those back rooms? So I know Michael Jordan dribbles the ball well. He reads the court. He understands body language. What does a person formerly at Comcast?
I'd have to look up his name. I used it in the talk. There was a gentleman who was the head of lobbying at Comcast, where I think New York Times or the Post, someone did an article where they said this is the most important executive at Comcast. And he had been working for the mayor before he went into that role. The mayor went on to be the governor of the state, and when he left that role, Biden made him ambassador to Canada. So he was in and out of those. And that article said he did like 3 or 4 dinners at his house for the Obama campaign. And so he was right in the center of all of it in a way that the startup in Silicon Valley had no chance. Like, we didn't have any of those relationships, right? And so just woven into the fabric of it all. There's a huge irony. When I gave that talk, and I spent 25 years in Silicon Valley, it was titled 2851. And I used that title because I had a punchline at the end where I said the reason Silicon Valley works so well is because it's so far fucking away from Washington, D.C., and that was the distance in miles. But since I gave that talk, I'd say Silicon Valley's gotten more like rooted in Washington, D.C. than it ever has before. So there's a certain irony to that.
Do you read regulatory capture as corruption?
I think it can be both sides of the coin. I mean, you can look at what the crypto world did in getting Trump elected, and you can look at stable coins, and you could say, I can move money via stable coin right now in seconds for pennies anywhere around the globe. And you can't do that through a bank. You can't do that through a traditional financial institution. They don't do it for that price. They delay it and they charge you way more money. And you could say, well, they're trying to change things. Now, if they were to change things and when, I suspect over time, they would start doing the exact same things, once they had those relationships. So I'm the other big thing that's causing this right now is venture capitalists have gotten into military equipment, which is nothing I know anything about. But rest assured, without relationships, they wouldn't have been able to do that, because the McDonnell Douglases of the world would have used regulatory capture to cut them off. So it was probably imperative that they have those relationships to bring disruption to those fields and to fight back against it. But if they have it long enough, they'll certainly use it against the next guy. And by the way, I think this is playing out in real time in AI. I mean, there are many people, including David Sachs, that think Dario and the team at Anthropic, Anthropic's lobbying. The only company that has lobbied as much as Anthropic early in its life was FTX and SBF. He also lobbied heavily, but they have people on the ground in every state. They're the ones pushing for state by state regulation. And at the end of that talk I gave, I said I was worried that the AI people were begging for regulation to pull up the ladder. We'll see what happens. I'm more fearful that that's their motive than anything else. Yeah.
All right. You stop shy of saying yes or no, for that matter, to its corruption. So I have a growing thesis.
I'm sure they don't view it as corruption. Although, to the extent that I don't think any of them think it's corruption. I think they're just playing the game on the field. But the problem is, I was really enamored. I'm kind of excited about stable coins because I've just been so pissed off at the U.S. financial system for not embracing what I would call instant digital transfer. So every one of the 7 other largest countries in the globe had the government fixed instant digital transfer a long time ago. In the UK, it's called faster payments. You can go straight to Wikipedia and read about UK faster payments. They put it in 20 years ago. Whoa. And you can move money instantly for almost nothing. And in the US, ACH is 3-day settlement. What the hell are we doing? It's 2026. And in China and Australia, and recently there's something in Argentina called, I think, BRICS. They just pushed this through like 6 years ago. So here's a country that everyone would admit is behind us from an innovation standpoint, who just did this thing that the UK did 20 years ago. And you can go look at it, and we still can't do it because the banks fight it. There's a program called FedNow that's supposed to do this, that's on the slowest roll you can possibly imagine. And I would, when they would talk about FedNow in front of the financial committee, I would turn on, C-SPAN or whatever, and I would watch. And I would see the congressmen and senators that would be anti-FedNow, and I would immediately go onto that website that lists who their donors are, and you'd see large banks. Boom, 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 boom. And so the problem is, I'm a big believer that Citizens United was a bad thing. Like these super PACs, like anything that allows more influence. And there's another crazy thing that I learned in the Tropos situation is your senator and your congressman, the minute they get on committees, they start raising money outside of your geographic area. That should just be, I think it should be illegal, but it's certainly just send off an immediate alarm. Like we live in a day and age of blockchain. Like if you raise money from a campaign contribution from someone in California and you're a Tennessee congressman, like that should just be instantly like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's not your constituency, right? It's not like, so and there may be things to do there, like to create more awareness of those things,
Okay. So you're somebody that thinks through how we start untangling some of these things. One of the things that I found really interesting that you mentioned earlier is what they do in China to create competition. The analogous situation here would be interstate competition.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a potential solve where it's like, yeah, if you want to do stupid decisions, you go do your stupid no free Wi-Fi for you decision, but we're going to do free Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Is that a way that we could start?
I think it can be. And I've recently become aware of a professor at Harvard, Thomas Kane, who I'm just learning about, who's trying to analyze different policies in K through 12 and amplify the ones that are working better. That's something I'm excited about with the Policy Institute. A lot of people have asked me about the proposal in California for a wealth tax. And my opinion on it is, okay, they can try it. Like, let's see what happens. Like, let's run a bunch of experiments. I've been told, and I'm still learning on this, that James Madison thought about this in the Federalist Papers, that he said, people can move. We have a federalist system where there's federal laws and state laws. Let's run a bunch of experiments and see what works. And I think people migrating is a great pointer to people are migrating probably towards good policy, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm sitting in Austin. This is super hard for a lot of people to understand, and we should talk about it as loud as we possibly can. One of the fastest growing cities in the nation, rents have fallen for 4 years. That's good policy. Like half of the country is up in arms because they say they have a housing crisis and housing's too expensive. Just come look at what's happening right here. Just study it. Like it's solvable. And it's all a bunch of NIMBY build policy that they push through. Like they actually changed the policy, and that led to more building, and that led to rents falling. Like zoning policy, building policy, it's happening. It's really happening. You can see it. There's a solution to this problem. And the states that have the problem and cry about it don't do what Austin's doing. They do a lot of other things. That's bad policy. And this is, yes, I think state versus state competition is a super interesting construct. And I think I can do a good job of hopefully working with others and academicians of finding good policy and finding bad policy and shining a light on both. We can just make it positive. I'm fine with that. Austin has a solution to housing prices. Positive. Everyone should study it.
Now,
and by the way, Houston's done something really similar in homelessness. And there are articles you can go find on that. Houston's had a number of policies and they've reduced their homeless population by 2/3. Go study that. Go talk about that.
Now, given that we have big wins like that, whether it's housing or homelessness, and yet they don't matriculate out to the other states, is that politicians suck at creating financial models? Is it that they're just too good at storytelling? Like, is it that they get federal dollars and so they can paper over problems? Like, why doesn't that competition work in America in the way that it does in China?
Some of it comes back to that quote, Milton Friedman quote I had. I think people elect politicians based on what they think their intentions are versus what they're actually capable of doing.
Do you think we can change that? Can we get people to pay attention?
I don't know. I'm going to try. I think shining a light on these policies that work and is worth a go. Similar to the nuclear thing that I mentioned, I think if we talk about it more and people that are good at communicating can highlight it more, like no one should be able to have a discussion in a city that has a problem with housing prices and not be able to respond to a question about, well, what are they doing in Austin? Like that just shouldn't happen. It may take people like you, Tom. I mean, it's not clear to me, and I don't want to go deep into this, but it's not clear to me that the mainstream media is as interested in uncovering this stuff as they used to be. And they used to be quite interested in it, Yeah. Although to be fair, on the Austin rent thing, you'll find plenty of articles. Like if you just go do a search, there are plenty of people talking about it. But I think you can get more people talking about it, like we are right now. Like I think it's possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I cover stories like this, there'll be a base hit. It's rare that it really goes viral. If I want something to go viral, it both has to be, I have to get incredibly emotional about it, which that may speak to just what people want from me and not necessarily something global. And it needs to be something that triggers their emotion as well. And I think that's a big part of the problem. So while I think, yes, it's good to shine a light on it and all of that, but as somebody who spent the last, call it 10 plus years mastering the algorithms, which is basically mastering human emotion, you go down a path that I think people will recognize in the way that social media distorts behavior far more than it does something positive. So I worry about that. On the policy side, I just keep coming back to, you know this about me, my audience certainly knows this about me, but I spent now almost 25 years as an active entrepreneur being able to pay people salaries by my ability to generate things that are profitable. And it forces you to focus on cause and effect, what actually works, what's profitable, cut what's not, focus on what is. And we don't have that feedback loop, certainly in the US, I think, because of central banking, the ability to run deficits and money print. And if we don't get rid of that, I think you run in Ray Dalio's big debt cycle and there's no way around it. And the empire will collapse in roughly 250 years and it just is what it is. Do you see a way out of that loop or are we trapped here?
Yeah, you're channeling David Friedberg's in the same mindset. I guess if I felt that way entirely, I would probably just go fishing for the rest of my life and wouldn't be talking to you right now. Like what's the point of it? Like I don't want to roll around in it if it's inevitable. And so I'm going to go tilt against it, maybe.
But is it tilting? Are you just holding on to like a feeling that maybe it's possible? Or can you anchor on something that's like, no, I've seen this thing that tells me that we've got a shot?
Yeah, I mean, like on this state stuff, it's not just like, so certainly Governor Abbott is very much about moving red tape out of the way here in Texas. And as a result, Elon moved all his companies here. And there's a lot of positive momentum around data centers and other things coming to the state of Texas, semiconductor factories, like all kind of stuff. And that's been true in Arizona. But I would also say, like, if you look at Pennsylvania, Shapiro, the highway went down and they got it working again in like 12 days. And he did it by moving red tape out of the way. And then it's celebrated. And if a politician is going to stand up and tell you, hooray, look what I did, I got government out of the way. I think it's kind of funny, but why get them out of the way just for an emergency? Let's get them out of the way for everything. Yeah. And so, look, there's the part of why I love studying China, both the provincial competition, but also how fast they're building things. Dan Wong's book, Breakneck. People need to be aware of what's possible, and it costs 400% more to build a fission nuclear plant, 70-year-old technology in the U.S. than it does in South Korea or China. Oh. Get in touch with that. Get in touch with that. And every politician, that should scare the living hell out of them, that's true. And they should want to know why it's true. And to me, why wouldn't you put a government task force together to go figure that out? Like, I think the NRC is all structured poorly. The Navy has tons of insight. They've used nuclear technology forever with no incident whatsoever. Like, let's go solve that problem nationally and figure out what the hell's wrong. Or let's just pay South Korea to build one here and tell us what's wrong. Like let's go figure it out.
I love that. I'm optimistic by nature, almost to a fault. And I look at, say, AI, which I think is as it's going to be as profoundly transformative as people say. It's already wildly impacted my business, increased profitability, increased top line revenue. I mean, it's really been extraordinary, even at my size. When you look out at that, Americans are terrified. The Chinese are not. Do you have a sense of like what's going on there? What thing do we understand that the Chinese should be afraid of, or what do they understand that should make us more optimistic?
One thing that happened on a recent trip there, I was having lunch with a venture capitalist, a Chinese venture capitalist, and he said, one thing that fascinates me, he says, every Chinese entrepreneur reads everything they can about American entrepreneurism. So there's podcasts, there's blog posts, there's articles, there's interviews. They listen to 100% of it. Like, every Chinese entrepreneur knows what Elon Musk is thinking, knows what Anthropic's thinking, knows all this stuff. He goes, there's zero in the other direction. There's no American entrepreneur that wakes up saying, boy, I wonder what Lei Jun and Xiaomi is thinking tomorrow, even though some of that content's out there. And so that's pretty eye-opening, just that notion, right? That they're learning from us and we're not learning from them. It's not a good fact.
For sure. Now, do you have a sense of what their take is on AI that keeps them so optimistic?
Yes. Well, this is an interesting thing. So the polling is, I'm going to guess at the numbers. You may have read it in more deeply, but like 70% of Americans are worried about AI, and that number in China is like 20. And part of the problem is the doomerism is loudest at the biggest AI companies in America. And yeah. I fear it's because they want this regulatory capture. It is one of the most, if it's not regulatory capture, I don't know what it is. Like, I've never seen an entrepreneur stand up and say, I'm making this incredible technology. And by the way, my employees are doing secondary transactioning and stuffing billions of dollars in our pockets, but it's really scary and it's going to kill us all. I've never seen this. I've never seen it before. Yeah. My only explanation is they want regulatory capture, but I don't know. But it's having a lot of perverse effects, including what you're talking about, sentiment for the whole country. Yeah. And by the way, if we put a whole bunch of policy on top of our AI systems, I think what may happen, if you look at what happened with the internet, there was a global market that the American companies served, and there was a ring fence around China, and the Chinese internet companies ended up serving that because China kept out Google and Facebook and those types of companies. I think what could happen with AI is we could build a fence around ourselves, and China could end up serving the rest of the world. I think that's already almost fait accompli in EVs and solar panels.
Damn.
But it could be true with AI technology as well.
Now, is that because they're outperforming us on the solar panels and EVs, or because we've done something from a regulatory perspective that just makes the hurdle too big?
Both. I mean, Elon on Cheeky Pint podcast said that he thinks American energy problem could be solved with solar panels and a huge section of Nevada. But he said the math won't work with American source solar panels, and that we won't do it because we won't put the Chinese panels there. And
Man,
batteries.
do me a favor really fast, because people aren't going to understand what that means. Tell the story of the COVID tests and the difference. I think it was Germany versus here. I didn't hear that. I was aghast. I was clutching my pearls hearing you tell this story. This is wild.
Yeah. So there were two types of COVID tests during COVID. One was the PCR test. That's the one that took 24 hours and was more painful, and you couldn't do it at home. You had to go, although that was probably a fallacy too. I think the marginal cost of a PCR test was below $2, and the average price that was recompensated by the government was over $100. So I've heard all these stories. This is kind of, I'll do it quick. I've heard all these stories of people that opened up PCR testing facilities, made $15 million and retired.
Oh my God.
But that was PCR. There was a much cheaper test, which was the one that you could still buy at CVS and take home and do yourself, the saliva test. And that one, that technology was like 40 years old. And in Germany, they approved 85 vendors, and the marginal cost was about $1. Like you could buy a test for $1. Here in the U.S., the team at the FDA that regulated this, the guy that regulated it, and I had him in the talk, you can go watch it, had worked at these two companies before, and they were the only two that got a license to do it in the US. So we only had two manufacturers, and they charged like $12 a test, so 10x higher. And the US government, even when they finally got behind those tests, bought them from them. So they used taxpayer money, and I had the list is online, but I had it in the presentation of the 85 vendors Germany approved, and so it was a trivial commoditized technology that the government helped protect two vendors selling at god awful high prices when it could have been super helpful to everyone to have for $1 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is crazy to watch this play out in the energy markets, to see that in the guise of we're going to help you, to your point, they like what people are saying, but nobody ever stops to check to see what's actually happening, which spirals me out of control when we look at education. I don't even have kids, and I'm mortified that we spend more per student than basically anywhere else in the world, and we're middle of the pack in terms of results, and everybody's cry is to spend more money. And I'm just like, this is wild. And then if you look at KIPP schools, to the point about do these experiments, you've got KIPP schools in the same building as some of these government schools. Yeah. And the KIPP schools are churning out kids that are like, oftentimes you'll have brother and sister separated. One of them goes to the KIPP school, one of them's in the public school. So they're in the same household. Yeah. And the one that's in the KIPP school crushes it, and the one that's in the public school does not. So it's like everything that you could do to make it a natural test where there's a placebo control, yes, you've done. And we still cannot get people to do like school vouchers so that parents can vote with their feet. Like this kind of thing, literally spirals me out of control.
Well, but it's happening. I had mentioned this professor at Harvard, Kane. He's studying this. School vouchers have been passed in Texas, and that's the state by state experiment. So it's playing out here. So stay tuned. I'm gonna go tilt against this also.
Oh, that one, man! I really hope you tilt hard. As again, somebody that doesn't have kids, but nonetheless, I become obsessed.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, with making sure that we are educating the life out of our kids. Again, this goes back to partly because I don't have kids, I want to pay something forward to the next generation, and then partly because I am so focused on Thucydides' trap and how to be the ones that don't end up in open conflict, which doesn't happen nearly as often as conflict, but getting us up to snuff, getting us excited to be Americans, getting us excited to compete, and really wanting the best and the brightest, and to see that meritocratic push to get people to really do something great. And that's certainly what it felt like to me in the 80s, was America was the hotbed of we could do anything.
Joe Lemont's tilting at some cool ideas as well with Alpha Schools. So we'll see those play out as well. They're going to expand that pretty dramatically and license the technology more broadly.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be the role of AI in education?
Well, so if you listen to him, this is Alpha School, Joe Lemont, who's done, I think he did Patrick O'Shaughnessy, and then recently Shane Parrish. I haven't listened to that second one, but you can go listen to him talk about it. They use AI for the rote learning in sciences and math, and talk a lot about pacing. So he says in any given classroom, the kids are all over the map in terms of how far along they are, but the teacher's forced to teach a curriculum that's fixed, and all those kids should be on different pacing and different, because they're all at different spots. And one of the problems that happens in our system is if a kid's not properly taught math in kindergarten or first grade or second grade, they get to third grade and they don't have the things they need to listen to that. So they got no chance. They need to go back and catch up. And so one of the things he's optimistic about is more personalized learning, where everyone can kind of come along at their own pace, which we'll see. I don't have any way to know if that will work writ large, and I don't have any way of knowing if every single child in every position in the socioeconomic ladder can engage with AI in that way. Let's go test and find out.
You've talked about when you're investing, you're always trying to do pattern recognition. Do you see any patterns in AI that map to other technologies that give us some clue where this is going?
I mean, the one that's obvious that doesn't need much discussion is venture capitalists see these waves and they know they're disruptive, and so they get behind them. And in that way, AI is the same as the internet and the computer and all these other things. I think the venture capitalists have properly identified that this is going to change things. And it already has in certain fields. I've talked to lawyers that have, substantially reduced the number of paralegals that work for them, as an example. So it's already happening. The number of doctors that are now leaning on AI for second opinions is 70% of the field. So this is already happening. So it's harder to think about it in terms of business models and winners and losers. Venture capitalists will talk about stacks and different places in the stack. So NVIDIA's, at the bottom of the stack, and some application companies at the top, and all these people are in the middle. There's hosting companies and there's model providers. There does appear to have been a move recently by OpenAI and Anthropic to embrace direct customer connectivity. So one business model they could have, which they have had in the past, is we'll sell the token machine to a third party, and that third party will turn it into a application. So think, Anthropic powering Cursor that people then used for programming. More recently, Anthropic's launched their own competitor to Cursor. So this move to say, I want to be directly connected to the customer, is a sign. I think it's a pretty strong sign that there was fear that being a model provider solely was as protectable as they wanted it to be. Because people were switching out the models, sometimes with open source from China and things like that. But if you have the customer lock in and contract, then you don't have to worry about that as much. So that's one thing we're seeing.
Do you think AI is a bubble?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I've said this before, but there's a wonderful book by Carlotta Perez where she says that only real waves cause bubbles. So when the question's asked, there's this notion of, well, if it's a bubble, then AI is not real.
Right.
And you get into this argument. No, what happens is when there are real waves, people get rich quick. That's already happening here. These huge secondaries at these AI companies. So people are stuffing billions of dollars in their pocket. When people get rich quick, it attracts interlopers and charlatans. And, and this, by the way, this was true in the gold rush. Like, this isn't a new concept. Like, if people are getting rich quick, everyone rushes in. And that's what creates bubbles. So, yes, I'm seeing actions and activity that look speculative and that probably is over risk seeking. And when will that correct? I don't know. It's a very big wave. There's real customers buying real products. There's people taking massive bets, the biggest bets ever taken in the venture capital world. And it may be that some form of correction doesn't happen until 5 years from now. But there will be one day, because the speculative part is showing up.
And how do you think about investing through something like this for the average retail investor? Like,
I think it's tough, man. Like, at this point, like, the odds that you're going to have some kind of insight around some AI company when they're raising money at the highest prices they ever have, like, I think it'd be foolhardy. And by the way, if you just had the index, you're pretty well exposed. NVIDIA got so big as a percentage of the index. Like, if you just had an S&P index, you have a pretty strong NVIDIA position. Like, and you certainly have Microsoft and Google. Like, you're doing well. Like, that back to Burton McHale, like, that generic advice would have served you fine for the AI way.
Now, do you think that AI is going to have the kind of job disruption that we're expecting? We're on the back right now of a bunch of layoffs, but you've got Mark Andreessen who's saying, no, this is not because of AI. This is them just using a PR excuse to right size their organizations. And other people saying, no, this is AI.
Yeah, I think both are true. I mean, I think anyone that does a layoff today is going to write it in, we're just being smart. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, it's just such an easy take. And I think Square was the one that kind of kicked this off. And plenty of people pointed out that on a revenue dollar per employee basis, they were like 3 or 4x many of their peers. So highlighting the fact that they needed to get fit, regardless of whether, AI might help or not. And so I think you're going to see some of both. Yeah, I go back to what I said earlier. Whether you're a company or an individual, if you're worried about AI disruption, become the most AI-enabled version of yourself you can possibly be. If there are 30, let's just pick something. Let's say there's 30 paralegals at a law firm, and of the 30, you're the one that knows most about how to use AI to do what a paralegal does. What are the odds you get fired? I think very low.
Yeah, for sure.
They're going to want to keep you around to run the AI tools.
Yeah. I try to get people to see that same thing is, yes, it's entirely possible that the jobs market as we understand it now becomes very different in the future, but you want to be the last man standing. And so if you're the most efficient because you are leveraging AI, you're going to be in a really good spot. Now, I do think there's one question around AI. When I talk about what I see in the future, I, at least in my own mind, have to be very careful to delineate between AI as it stands now, which is a phenomenal tool, but it doesn't have good taste unto itself. It will routinely make things up. And so you have to know how to catch it, when it's, getting into a problem, you have to know which answer is better than the other. But then there's where it could possibly, it's not there yet, but it could possibly get to the point where it becomes recursively self-learning and actually becomes super intelligent. Do you have any mental model for whether this is likely to become more intelligent than humans?
I'm not bought in yet to the notion that will happen. I'm one of these big believers in that phrase, what is it, strong opinions loosely held. Mm. So my strong opinion right now is that's not going to happen. I know that certain people believe that it will, and I know other people that are skeptics on that. Regardless, like, you have to know what it's capable of at the edge of your field, and the only way you're going to do that is by playing with it. I've met many, mostly academicians for some reason, who are skeptics, and they got it to fail once, and that's the memory they locked in their brain, and then they quit testing it. And I said, well, when did you do that? And I said, have you tried that experiment across 4 versions of the same AI bot? Because you can do that now. You can go back and use the older version. And if it's getting better, you should be aware of that. Like, does it still make that mistake or not anymore? And if it's not anymore, then you can't sit around and tell me that it doesn't work because of this thing you did. They're definitely getting better. And so, like, knowing what's possible, certain fields are going to be more deterministic than others. I'm not saying to do it 100, I'm not saying rely on everything it says 100% of the time, but it can turbocharge what you do. And if you listen to different people explaining, especially like small business people, go out in your community and talk to small business people that have figured out how this can help them, and listen to the list of things they have it doing for them. It'll blow you away.
That's wild. When you look at the way that we could do AI that would be better for humanity, do you think open source or traditional proprietary companies? I'm a big believer in open source for almost any technology. I'm probably out on some kind of wild edge of the curve where I actually think the patent system may be a waste of time and just get in the way. And part of it comes from being exposed to open source and how wonderful it is. But there's this great book by Matt Ridley called The Rational Optimist. And he says most progress, and I love that word, progress, in the world has come from when ideas have sex. That's the phrase he uses. And the easy example to imagine is you go back to an agrarian society and a farmer walks into market and tells another farmer how he can double his crop output by doing this technique. That transfer costs nothing. That idea went through, and then that other farmer goes home and his whole community prosperity improves. So the teaching each other things that the other person knew is a free gift to increase prosperity. And to me, patents just get in the way of that. And the argument that someone would use against me making that argument is, oh, well, what's the incentive to succeed? But there is a litany of academicians that have developed new ideas without ever being paid for them. Like there's no proof. I don't think there's any proof whatsoever that progress would stop if there wasn't an immediate economic lock-in. This may relate to regulatory capture of like a 17-year window. And open source is just another incredible data point against that argument, in that people contribute tons of time and ideas to these projects with no immediate economic gain. And these technologies become building blocks for other entrepreneurs because they're free. Like, it's just so, like any entrepreneurial endeavor, if there's an open source alternative, they'll tilt towards it because it just makes their job easier and cheaper. Do you have a sense of why China is going open source? Is it just for the reasons that you said, or do they see a way to leverage it?
The previous 5-year plan, I think that's the 14th 5-year plan, specifically mentioned open source. And I think what happened is, for 20 years, they are accused by the West of being IP thieves, like flat out, like just straight up called that. And so if you're in that place where you're accused of that and you see Linux and you see MySQL, this looks like a pretty good solution to your problem, right? Like the world has said this stuff's free. And so they got behind these programs and in a big way. On a global scale, and this started 20 years ago. And so I think it's a pretty good foil to the accusation of being a IP thief if you embrace this idea that IP should be free. And in AI in particular, there's a situation there where there's probably 10 deep-pocketed players who are all competing, and open source has become part of the competitive requirement. And that's super powerful because they can all co-learn from one another. It's wildly powerful.
It's very interesting at the aggregate level, but I really just don't understand what is the thing that they use to build a moat to make sure that their company is successful.
But so my firm Benchmark has had liquidity events on over 10 open source companies. Like you come up with ways to do it. It's just more competitive. There's a notion in economics called pure competition. You can also go find the Wikipedia page on that. And in pure competition, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that's what drives the most prosperity for everyone for all the consumers that are out there, because you end up with the lowest priced product. And that's pure competition. Things like patents and lock-in and the regulatory capture, these things prevent us from getting towards pure competition. And so you end up with products that are priced too high. You end up with margins that are ridiculously high. So I think it's bad for consumers to have that stuff. But you could build businesses in pure competition. Like they happen. And there have been tons and tons. MongoDB, huge public company around an open source technology.
So they're doing
you just
something.
end up selling it in different ways. You sell support, you sell security, you sell
But do they do anything proprietary on top of the?
They try to,
underlying?
yeah. There's a huge continuum of what open source is. So different people use different licensing models and things so that they can have add-ons and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've thought a lot about this primarily because as a video game developer, I've watched one of the more spectacular sort of dramas play out where you had a game being developed that they allowed for modding. They didn't put tight restrictions around it. And then the modded game ended up being more popular than the original game. And so they spun off like a multi-billion-dollar franchise off of this open source mod, and the people who made the game are obviously traumatized because they didn't see any of that revenue. I don't even know if they're still around. And so it's fascinating because one of the ways for me to get attention for my game is to allow people to mod it and build off of it. And at the same time, I don't want to be a midwife to somebody going and building something with this thing.
It's all good, man. It's all good. It's all good. It's all.
Is it, Bill?
Yes, it is. Because one of the key reasons we've been such a big backer of open source is because open source has a distribution advantage, which relates to the mod thing you're talking about. Like if people contribute to it and adopt it organically, then you don't have to go out. You're not hiring a salesperson to go convince someone to use your technology. You're calling into an account that's already using your technology and say, how would you like us to help you feel more secure about this and provide patches and help you with problems? And so it has distribution built in. That's
interesting. You're right. It shifts the business model. It's maybe less interesting in entertainment, but if you're willing to do a services model or you build something new proprietarily on top of it, it's interesting. I'm just saying
it's good because it's competition. If you believe in free enterprise, you believe in capitalism and why America exists, it's a more intense form of competition. So as a business person, you don't like it because it feels more wild and woolly, but it's actually better for the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt on that. It is just that businesses tend to be capital intensive. You're putting yourself massively at risk. And so you're trying to think through, okay, what are the reasonable things that I should be able to control?
You would have a hard time convincing me that risk capital is in shortage in America right now.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the most risk-seeking venture capital behavior I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's talk about why, because this is where I think you and I may view, well, I don't know. I'm going to give you my take, and I'm very curious to know if we just look at this very, very differently. So I believe that the world that we see, all of the distortions, all of the madness, basically come down to two things. You have a central bank that allows you to deficit spend and money print, and then we have been successful for a very long time. And that makes people think that success is just natural. So I've explained the success is just natural part earlier, but the central bank creating massive distortions by making money cheap, deficits possible, and debt just abundant. What do you think about that? Do you think that's creating some of the behavior you see, or is it something else?
Certainly the long period that people now call ZIRP, where we had near zero interest rates, which was unprecedented in the history of the country, led to, I think had that not happened, you would have had a correction in venture capital, maybe in private equity as well, that I would have called it a healthy correction. But because of it, and then because AI came on the heels of it, that correction never happened. And so you had this prolonged availability of capital that I do think has contributed to what I described as the most risk-seeking, venture capital movement I've ever seen.
How much do you think that risk-seeking has to do with people understanding that because we're in an inflationary environment, if they don't get into an asset somewhere, that money's just going to be eaten away?
When it was zero, I've only met Warren Buffett once in my life, and it was at a group function, so we all had one question each. And I said, we've had zero interest rates for like 4 years in a row, and your DCF models just don't even work. If you set interest rates negative, they literally fall apart. And I said, so how do you? And I said, it just seems to create a bunch of risk-seeking behavior. And he goes, "You betcha." That's what he said. So
yeah.
So I do
here
think
we
that.
Are.
Yeah, I mean, rates have come back up, and and there's questions about the dollar and whether other currencies compete with it. So it could. I'm a believer that healthy resets are good, not bad. And so I ironically, relative to your concern, and I'm not as big of a Dalio convinced it's all coming to an end. But if I were, I would want corrections to happen because they get people more in touch with the reality of it all.
What's the thing you anchor around that makes you think maybe Dalio's not reading this right?
I wouldn't go as far as to say, like, he's a very smart man and he's thought about this a long time. In that little video he created, like, I want to crawl under a rock every time I watch it. So he's able to convince me that it's a problem. And I also think humans in general have a hard time looking over time. And politicians certainly aren't held accountable over time. It's an area where I think transparency can help. Like, there are states that don't have their public pensions on their balance sheets. What's that about? Like, and so anyway, I'd like to go study it more. I think I don't find any. I don't find value in the notion that there's no way to stop it. And it goes back to what I said about fishing all day. Like let's go try and affect change to prevent that from happening. I just want to tilt towards that frame of mind.
Yeah, no, I hear that. The thing that I maybe am tilting hardest against in my life is the K-shaped economy. So we've got, if you own assets, you're winning. If you don't own assets, your life is getting more expensive by the day. Do you, as you think about the policy initiative, do you think that there are things that we can do from a policy perspective to start bringing that gap back together?
Well, I mean, I think this exact issue you bring up was part of the impetus for my former podcast partner to launch the Invest America that became the Trump accounts. Like I think this was on his brain when he came up with the idea, and it's one of the quickest policy wins I've ever seen in my entire life. Like the way they pushed that through, and then getting private public partnership was that's a policy when I've never seen the likes of. So Michael Dell put $6.5 billion behind this, and there's more momentum around it. And it's even given me an idea. Like I keep wondering, what if you could do that for teachers? What if
that's interesting.
Private donors could help create teacher bonuses in different states in a state versus state competition, like a way to give back that feels, and I talked to Michael about it. Like it just felt, he's got a huge foundation that's been doing charity work for 20 years. And there's in your brain, you're like, is this really affecting anything? Is this really working? And the notion of a direct transfer of wealth from one party to the other feels way more of a win in his brain intellectually than funding a nonprofit that may or may not affect change, So anyway, that's an example of a very recent thing that has transpired. There's a lot of ways it could go wrong, but it's interesting. Everyone should go claim their Trump account for their kids. Not everyone has claimed them yet.
That's
but
wild.
Millions.
I'm sure some people just don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you famously backed Travis Kalanick and Uber. You were, if I'm not mistaken, a character in Super Pumped. One, how true was that? And then in terms of accuracy of portraying you and portraying the events. Yeah. And then I'll have some follow-ups about what makes, since he's still very active, what makes him such an extraordinary entrepreneur.
So one, they had Kyle Chandler play him, and he's way shorter than I am. And most of the females I know in my life say he's differently attractive than I am. So I'll leave it at that. They seem to be fond of him. And so I don't think he looks like me. The story missed a couple of things. One, I think, Travis is an extremely intelligent, powerful, successful entrepreneur, and multifaceted, multidimensioned. And I don't think that came across for whatever reason. And so you don't accomplish things at that scale without that ability. And so, and a three-time entrepreneur. So he had done two before. They weren't as successful as he wanted to be. So he was motivated by that. There's just a lot of dimensions of it. The early days of the company were very traditional founder scrappiness. And I think the first scene of the show, they're in some bank building, like really nice offices. That's just completely false. Like it was traditional, grimy, whatever cheapest rent you can get kind of place, So some of those pieces were wrong.
Now, an idea that I've heard about entrepreneurship that certainly I've lived and totally understand is every startup begins as pirates and ultimately has to figure out how to become the Navy.
Yeah.
I'm very curious. He seemed, at least from the things that I can get publicly, he seemed very good at the pirate phase and maybe less good at the Navy phase. And I wonder if that's accurate, A, and then B, if you had to define for people what that pirate phase is, what are the things that make somebody good at that?
Yeah. And by the way, that idea, that metaphor and meme you're talking about was a blog post written by Reid Hoffman specifically about Uber. So
really? That's funny. I've heard about it secondhand, but didn't know where it came from.
You can go find it online. So Reid was writing about Uber, and he came up with that construct.
That is hilarious.
Look, plenty. I think you can find pirate elements in the early days of Bill Gates and Microsoft and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. Like you can find piratey things that they did, early on. Anytime you end up touching government, and Uber in particular was in a field where there was immense regulation, that idea becomes more poignant because you're going to get judged at a higher level. And we ended up in a situation where we had like 5 state attorney generals investigating us. And so it got very real very fast. But I think that is I think it's a useful metaphor as he wrote it. A lot of disruption comes from breaking rules. And I don't mean like breaking laws. I mean breaking whatever best practice thought process there was before. And a lot of Elon's thinking, and the reason he's able to build SpaceX and Starlink is because he was willing to doubt that the prior best practices were right and willing to try new things and go in a different direction. So it's part and parcel with being an entrepreneur that you want to look at things differently. And quite frankly, some of the regulations were complete and utter bullshit. There in many of the largest cities in the US, there was a rule that a black car, after it dropped its customer, had to return to base before it went out again. And those laws were written by the taxi lobby, written specifically by the taxi lobby. And no mayor in their right mind would want to get behind a podium and explain why that law was on the books. And so we were successful as a company, when I say we at Uber, in getting those laws removed from the books. And those laws should have been removed. Like they were stupid and unproductive laws that existed. And so there was, I think, having come up and seen some of that, it makes you more piratey, right? To see those things out there. But there's a limit to it, right? And we certainly touched many of those limits.
What's the role of aggression in a startup CEO? I
think there is, I would use a different word. I would use a word that's more like unwaveringly determined, like just, you can't take them off of it. It's, in the book, we talk a lot about fascination. They have such a commitment to what they're doing that they can't sleep at night, like thinking about what they got to do next and how they're going to make it better. So there's just this unwavering commitment to what they're doing. I think that's critical because, especially in this day and age with all this venture capital available, there's 5 other people that have the exact same idea you do, I guarantee you. Like there's no proprietary idea and you got to run faster. Like you got to run faster and better than the competition or you're going to get eaten up. There's huge rewards if you do it and get it right.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so this idea of being determined, you've talked a lot about in your book, Running Down a Dream. You mentioned earlier with what you were saying about Angela Duckworth, it's got to be something that you're super into. You've got to have the passion in order to persevere. Yeah. So you've had this incredible career as an investor. Why is that the part of your experience that you focused on? What is it that you hope people will take away from this book?
So I stumbled on this idea about 8 or 9 years ago. I was reading a bunch of biographies and I noticed this through line between these successful people that started at the bottom and were able to rise to the very top of their field. And I noticed they were all doing the same thing. And I wrote it down the way I would write a blog post about marketplace companies or something. And it just kind of grew over time. I got invited to talk at a university. I gave the talk. Certain people saw it. James Clear saw it and saw that talk and like posted it on his blog post. And so people started encouraging me to think about it as a book. And as I got post-venture and read Arthur Brooks' book and started thinking about what I want to do for the world, this book seemed like it could impact way more people than a book on how to be a good VC. Like, I just don't know that the world needs that second book. And so it became a passion project. It became something that, and I've been in communication with people that saw that original talk ended up on YouTube, that saw that talk. The talk gave them the permission to change careers and go do something that they're fascinated by and love rather than what they were doing. And a bit flipped in their head and they're now doing this other thing and they call me and they thank me for it. And so I think the book certainly lives in the self-help category, but many of those books preach oh, if you adopt this frame of mind and do this every day and have this new way of doing things, you'll eventually be better. My book's more trying to create this toggle in your brain where I say, stop doing this and just go do this. And then it'll get easier for you and you'll have more fun and you'll be more fulfilled and you'll impact more people's lives. And so I'm trying to, I don't know how many people I can do this for, but I'm trying to give people permission to go do that thing, What
is the thing that you think in modern America or just modern life, depending on how globally this works, that is trapping people into, let's call it the safe path?
I think part of it, we talked about it earlier, but I think it's the way that our educational institutions have evolved and the fact that these schools won't increase capacity leads to this hyper-focused. And by the way, I also think there's just a genetic, hereditary part of your DNA that wants you to worry about your kids' economic stability. And I think it's very hard to get around. And so, in certain cultures, like people talk about the Indian culture being very pro-doctor, like there's certain cultures that just push kids in certain directions. And so it was a lot about economic safety. And I started this idea in this book before LLMs came along. So I didn't write it as a solution to that. But certainly there is a awareness now that safe doesn't mean safe, or safe isn't what it used to be. And so I think that's causing quite a bit of anxiety. And for anyone that has anxiety about their job, I would just beg them to give my book a shot and see if there might be a different path in their life than the one they're on. There was a Gallup poll done 3 years ago that said 29% of people call themselves engaged at work. I think those people are in a good place. I don't think AI is threatening them, but they had 59% in this category they called quiet quitting. They said they were ambivalent about their job. AI is coming after the ambivalent. I guarantee you. Like the best practices that you would learn in a physics class or an engineering class, those are in the model. Like the rote algorithm that you had to memorize and use on the test, those are in the model. And if you're fascinated about your field, you live in the nuance. You live beyond those things, beyond those programmatic things that you're taught to do at school, because you're constantly studying the edge and what's possible. And that's what's not in the model. And so I think the artisans, and I think you can use that word broadly across fields. You've met salespeople that you would call artisans, right? The best salesperson in your company is an artisan. There's no doubt about it. And they have things the models don't have, but you got to put yourself in that place. And the only way I think you can be in that place is if you're doing something you're fascinated by.
It's very interesting how easily people get trapped, either because they, sure, your parents are giving you something, but also economic security really does help. It's a very real thing. And then I think also a lot of times people struggle to figure out how to make a living doing the thing that they love. In the book, how do you advise people? You tell a lot of incredible stories. And by the way, for anybody that's on the fence about whether you should read it, the way that the stories are told is going to give you both an intellectual understanding and like this visceral emotional connection to what that kind of profound change can look like and how successful people can be on the other side. But how do you advise them to like, okay, you've got this thing you like, how do we take that hobby and actually make it a career?
I personally, and the intersecting people younger in their life will be super helpful because you have less economic realities, right? If you have 3 kids and a mortgage, it's a lot harder to be flexible. But one thing I feel profoundly about is a lot of these fields that we worry about being places you can't make money, you can actually have a career and do just fine. There's an anecdote at the back of the book where I was at South by Southwest and there was a panel on bedroom producers. These are people that can now produce an album from a bedroom because all the tracks can be sent to them digitally and the room was packed and they had a line for Q&A in this. this girl said, I really want a career in the music field, but my parents say you can't make money. And one of the guys on the panel, I found him, and his name's in the book, but he stood up and he said, I've never met anyone that tried hard that wasn't able to have a career in music. Like just kind of flat out said that. And the trying hard part, I'm going to tell another anecdote. I was talking with a person that leads job placement at one of the top universities in this country about the book. And she says, well, what do I do with, a poetry major? And I gave her two examples from the book, a guy that writes about the Grand Canyon and a guy in Houston that writes about Texas horticulture. And I said, look at these people. They made a career in these fields. How is that different from poetry? And she goes, but they worked really hard. And I'm like, yeah. And the unlock, the thing that I would tell you is if you're fascinated by something, the work's free. That's the thing. That's like the key unlock here. People that are fascinated by something, it doesn't feel like work. Like they're just having fun. And you can see it in what they do and how they go about it. And they love learning about the field. And the hardest part, I would say, and we call it the hardest part in the book, is finding that thing. And you might have to wander around. If you haven't found it yet, I think that's fine. Keep looking. I don't know that you can manifest it, right? You got to find it. I don't think you can just make yourself. And I think that's why Duckworth had this change of heart a little bit about grit. Like it just perseverance alone is not going to get you there. It needs to be free. You got to find that unlock.
Bill, on a personal level, some relationships end because the two people fall out of love, and sometimes a relationship ends because somebody falls in love with somebody new. You've had one of the most successful investing careers ever in all of human history. Did you fall out of love with investing, or did you fall in love with something new? A
little bit of both, I think. A little bit of both. This will sound ridiculous, but it's true. I was watching an episode of the new Letterman series where he interviews people with the long beard.
My next guest needs no introduction.
Yeah, and he had Seinfeld on, and they both mentioned this book, Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah. Yes, very
So
good.
I went and read it immediately because they were both so emphatic, and I tore through it. And he spent, 15 years grinding to get his big break, Steve Martin did. And then when he got it, it went vertical. Like it just went, and he progressed from nightclub to arena faster probably than any comedian had at that time. Like he just instantly was doing big shows. And one day he was on the stage in Vegas and he looked up in an arena and the upper deck was empty. And he never went on stage again.
Wow.
He never went on stage again. And he went and had an incredible career as an actor and became a famous banjo player, won some Grammys. And so anyway, after I read that, I was like, I'm going to hang him up soon. Like, I'm going to stop soon. Not because I couldn't have kept doing it, but I had such an awesome career and loved it so much. I didn't want to hang around and start being less good at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a quote that haunts me, which is that genius is a young man's game. And man, I really don't want it to be true, but I certainly get all the reasons why it probably is true.
Oh, and VC is definitely a young person's game. And I said that my whole career. And Benchmark is famous for bringing 27, 28-year-olds in as general partners, which is when I got invited in at that age. And it tilts towards youth in so many ways. They're fascinated by the new stuff. The age of the new entrepreneur is much more likely to be their age, so they connect with them. Hustle. Man, venture is a hustle job. And it's harder to hustle as you get older. It's just harder. You have more things in your life. It's harder to hustle. So it bends towards youth. And I knew that, and I had talked about it forever. So those two things simultaneously made it very easy for me. And as you can tell, I have enthusiasm about these new things I want to go do,
Yeah, no, I love it, man. I'm so glad that you're going into this new phase. I'm super grateful that you took the time to talk to me today. Where can people find you, find the book?
Yeah, the book's everywhere you can buy books. It's called Running Down a Dream. If you type Dream and Gurley, Gurley, into Amazon or Google or anywhere, it'll come up immediately. So it's not hard to find. And some people, for whatever reason, like my voice, which I am not fully in touch with, but I did the audiobook. And so if you like my voice, you got that opportunity as well.
Rightfully so. I think when on a book like that, I think the author doing it is always much better. So I think,
and I'm also hearing from people it's a great graduation gift. So I'll throw that plug in as well.
For sure. Yeah. Great for that. Great for any time, as it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your life.
No doubt.
That and who you end up marrying. Those are
huge.
Probably the 1 and 2 biggest ones you're going to make.
Although this one you can change. Well, I guess you can change the marriage one too.
I was going to say, plenty of people, Bill.
Changing your careers is more or less frowned upon. Let's say that.
Yeah, no doubt.
And less dramatic. Less dramatic. Anyway. All right. Thank you so much.
Bill, thanks for taking the time, man. I appreciate it. Everybody, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
America doesn't exist. There's Blue America and Red America and Tech America and all these different sub-tribes within it. The word American is like the word Korean.
Yo, you're saying something here, Balaji.
Digital AI disrupts Democrat jobs, and physical AI disrupts Republican.